Kemi had always been headstrong. Her mother often said she was the kind of child who had to touch fire before believing it could burn. At 22, she was in her final year at the university and had always believed she knew what was best for herself. So when she met Femi, a charming and confident young man with a silver tongue, she didn't care about the warnings from those around her. Her mother had heard rumors about him, how he moved from one woman to another, making empty promises. Even Sade, Kemi's best friend, had tried to warn her, Kemi, you know Femi is not the settling down type. Everyone knows how he jumps from girl to girl. Sade had said one afternoon after lectures. Kemi had laughed, shaking her head. People talk too much. Femi is different with me. He cares about me. Sade sighed. That's what they all say before they get their hearts broken. But Kemi refused to listen. Femi had a way of making her feel special. He sent sweet text messages every morning, brought her lunch on campus, and whispered words that made her blush. One evening, Kemi's mother sat her down. My daughter, you are at an age where love feels like the most important thing in the world. But love should never make you foolish. That boy, Femi, he will hurt you. Kemi rolled her eyes. Mama, you don't even know him. Mama, Kemi shook her head. A mother knows when trouble is coming. Kemi dismissed her mother's words, believing that love was strong enough to change anything. She was determined to prove everyone wrong. Little did she know, she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Kemi and Femi's relationship moved fast. Within a few months, she was spending most of her nights at his place. It felt like a fairy tale. He would cook for her sometimes, play love songs, and tell her how lucky he was to have her. But there were small things that didn't sit well with her. There were nights when his phone would ring and he would step outside to take the call. Sometimes he would get messages from saved contacts with names like Babe 1 or Babe 2. When she asked about it, he would laugh and say, Kemi, you don't trust me. Then came the financial requests. Babe, can you lend me 20,000 naira? My business is down this month, he asked one day. Kemi hesitated. Femi, I don't have much money. I'm saving for my project. He kissed her forehead. I'll pay you back next week, I swear. Of course, the money was never returned. Kemi noticed how withdrawn Kemi had become. You're changing, Kemi. You've stopped focusing on school. Femi is draining you. Stop judging my relationship, Kemi snapped. Not everyone is lucky in love like you, Sade. Sade sighed and let it go. One evening, as Kemi lay in Femi's arms, he whispered, I don't know what I'd do without you. At that moment, she felt like the most important person in the world, but she was blinded by love, and her world was about to come crashing down. One afternoon, Kemi was cleaning Femi's apartment while he was out when his phone rang. She ignored it at first, but when it rang again, she glanced at the screen. The caller ID read, My love, curious. She hesitated before answering. Baby, I miss you, a female voice cooed from the other end. You know I don't like when you don't call me. Kemi's heart pounded. She gripped the phone tightly. Who is this? The girl paused. Who are you? Before Kemi could say another word, the call ended. She stood frozen, her mind racing, her stomach churned with anger and fear. She knew what she had to do. She needed to confront Femi. That evening, she waited for him at his apartment, her arms crossed. As soon as he walked in, she threw his phone at him. Who is my love? She demanded. Femi smirked and sat on the couch. Kemi, you're really asking me this? Why are you acting like my wife? Kemi's voice trembled. You told me I was the only one. He shrugged. Kemi, I like you, but let's be real. You're not the only girl in the world. Tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted to scream, to throw things, but instead, she grabbed her bag and ran out of his house. She should have left him then, but she didn't. Despite everything, Kemi found herself drawn back to Femi. He apologized a few days later, showing up at her hostel with flowers. I'm sorry, babe. You know I can't live without you. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that love was enough. One evening, after a heated argument about trust, Femi pulled her close and whispered, If you really love me, you'll prove it to me. Kemi swallowed hard. Femi, I'm not ready, he traced a finger down her arm. Then maybe you don't love me like you say. It was manipulation, but Kemi didn't see it. She wanted to keep him, to make him choose her. That night, she gave in. She had no idea that she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Weeks later, Kemi started feeling different. Her appetite changed. She felt constantly tired, and worst of all, her period was late. Sade noticed her discomfort and raised an eyebrow. Kemi, when last did you see your period? Kemi's heart skipped a beat. It's just late. Stress, maybe. Or maybe you need to take a test, Sade said, placing a pregnancy kit in front of her. Kemi's hands shook as she took the test. The seconds felt like hours. When the result appeared, she gasped. 2 red lines. No, this can't be happening, she whispered. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Sade hugged her tightly. What are you going to do? Kemi wiped her tears. I have to tell Femi, deep down, she already knew how this would end. Kemi barely slept that night. Her mind was in chaos and her body felt weak. She had imagined love to be something magical, but now she was trapped in a nightmare. She woke up early and made her way to Femi's house, clutching the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. When she arrived, Femi was sitting outside, laughing with a few of his friends. As soon as he saw her, he frowned. Kemi, why do you look like a ghost? What's wrong? She pulled him aside and whispered, Femi, I need to talk to you. He sighed and walked her inside. What is it? Kemi hesitated before handing him the test. I'm pregnant. Silence. Femi stared at the test strip in disbelief. Then, suddenly, he burst into laughter. Kemi's stomach twisted. What's funny? Femi wiped imaginary tears from his eyes. You think this pregnancy is my problem? You better go and find the real father. Kemi's blood turned cold. Femi, what are you saying? He stood up, his face hardening. I'm saying I don't know anything about this pregnancy. You girls always look for a scapegoat. Well, I'm not your fool. Tears welled up in her eyes. Femi, we've been together for months. You know you're the only one I've been with, Femi scoffed. That's what they all say. She felt like the air had been knocked out of her chest. You're denying me. Leave my house, Kemi. His voice was cold. She stood there, frozen in shock. The man she had given everything to, the man she had defended, was throwing her away like garbage. Femi, please, leave, he shouted. Kemi ran out of the house, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt so betrayed. She had loved the wrong man, and now she was alone. Kemi spent the entire journey home in silence, her mind replaying every warning she had ignored. When she arrived at her mother's house, she hesitated at the door. How was she going to say this? She walked in quietly, but her mother was already waiting for her. Kemi, what is it? Kemi opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then, as if something broke inside her, she fell to her knees, sobbing. Mama, I'm pregnant. A heavy silence filled the room. Mama Kemi closed her eyes, inhaling deeply before speaking. Who is responsible? Kemi wiped her face. Femi? Mama Kemi let out a bitter laugh. That useless boy? The same one I warned you about? Kemi nodded, ashamed. Where is he now? Her mother asked. She sniffled. He denied it. The slap came so fast that Kemi barely saw it coming. You mean after all my warnings, you still went ahead and got pregnant for that boy? Mama Kemi shouted. Kemi held her cheek, fresh tears pouring down Mama. I get out of my house, her mother interrupted. Kemi's heart sank. Mama, please. You didn't listen to me before, so go and face your decisions alone. Kemi grabbed her bag and stumbled out of the house, crying she had lost everything. Night had fallen and Kemi had nowhere to go. She sat on a bench by the roadside, watching cars drive past. Her phone buzzed. It was Sade. Kemi, where are you? Kemi sniffled. Mama chased me out. Come to my place, Sade said without hesitation. Kemi walked in the dark, her heart heavy. When she arrived, Sade pulled her into a tight hug. I told you that guy was bad news, she whispered. Kemi sobbed into her shoulder. I was so stupid, Sade rubbed her back. You're not stupid, you just loved the wrong person. But Kemi, you have to be strong now. You're carrying a child. Kemi wiped her eyes. How do I even start? Shay smiled. One step at a time. Kemi nodded, realizing that she had no choice but to fight for herself and her baby. Her life wasn't over, but it would never be the same again. Kemi stayed with Sade for a few days, but she knew she couldn't be a burden forever. She needed a plan. With Sade's help, she found a small job at a local restaurant. The pay was little, but it was something. Every day she worked hard, saving every penny. One afternoon, while serving a customer, she heard a familiar voice. Madam, add extra pepper. She turned around and froze. It was Femi. He was with another woman, laughing, acting as if she had never existed. Kemi clenched her fists, but forced herself to walk away. She would not beg him again. She was done crying. One evening, after work, Kemi ran into an old friend. Tunde, Kemi? He said, surprised. She looked up, forcing a smile. Tunde, long time. He frowned, noticing how tired she looked. Are you okay? Kemi sighed. Life hasn't been easy. Tunde invited her to sit. Tell me everything. For the first time in months, Kemi felt safe as she poured out her heart. Tunde listened patiently. Kemi, you're not alone. I'll help in any way I can. Tears welled in her eyes. Why are you being so kind? Tunde smiled. Because I've always cared about you. Kemi's heart ached. She had spent so much time chasing the wrong person while the right one had been there all along. Kemi started attending antenatal classes and focusing on her health. She moved into a small one-room apartment and continued working hard. Every day she reminded herself, I will not let this mistake define me. She was no longer the naive girl who believed in empty promises. She was becoming a woman who knew her worth. On a stormy night, Kemi went into labor. Sade and Tunde rushed her to the hospital. After hours of pain, she finally heard the cry of her baby, a beautiful baby girl. As she held her daughter in her arms, Kemi whispered, You are my second chance. I will be strong for you. Months later, Kemi heard the news. Femi had been duped by another woman. He was now broke and struggling. One day she saw him on the street, looking worn out. Kemi called, forcing a smile. She held her baby close and walked past him. Femi was her past, and she was done looking back. Kemi had learned the hard way, but she had grown. She no longer needed validation from anyone. She had her daughter, her strength, and a bright future ahead. Kemi sat by the window, watching her daughter sleep. She had lost herself in love once, but she had found something stronger, herself, and she would never make the same mistake again. The end.